Welcome back to the Margin Equation. I'm Kara Brown, CEO of Lead Coverage, here with Matt Cartwright from Magnus Technologies. Matt, tell us a little bit about Magnus.
Yeah. So Magnus is a SaaS-based platform, TMS, for asset-based carriers. So we handle the brokerage operations for them as well. Big thing for Magnus is the interoperability in the full ecosystem and providing a single platform that handles the full business life cycle for our customers, kind of from quote to cash, all the ancillary considerations in a cloud-based solution.
So, you and I have talked previously about the idea that some carriers don't really know the total cost to serve. And there's a difference between real margin and assumed margin, if you will. Can you give us a little bit of a top line on that? Like, what do you mean when you say real margin?
Yeah. So I think the easiest way to illustrate it is people often say, I want to have a P&L on the shipment,
Mm.
right? So I'm going to pick up this freight and deliver this freight. What's my P&L on the shipment? And the problem is nothing is isolated. Everything has kind of connections. How did the truck get there? How did the trailer get there? What happens when they delivered it? Where did they go? If I had to have multiple trucks or drivers facilitate the shipment from A to B, how am I looking at that over time? The shipment by itself is really hard to say. It's an isolated event. The truck driver and trailer doesn't just materialize at the origin, nor do they teleport when they deliver to the next spot,
That'd be
right?
so cool.
Yeah, it'd be really cool if we could do that. I think some of the shippers and customers, their customers feel like that's what you should do, but the truth is it doesn't happen that way. So, I think that idea of a shipment P&L, while by itself is fine, but if that's your entire governing consideration, it really becomes difficult. So for us, we kind of look at it holistically, what's happening over time, right? Week, month, you know, various things that contemplate the entire health of your freight network and how did you actually spend to fulfill that one shipment, but not by itself, because you don't get the actual luxury of saying, I materialized the asset at the origin, and then I teleported them when I delivered that one piece of freight.
It surprises me that this isn't the way that the business is run for most carriers today. I think about as a business owner myself, like how I separate, you know, cogs from expenses, like the basics,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Is it just really hard to do?
Yeah, I think it is. I think you get into a couple things. One, you get into kind of allocation of cost, right?
Yeah.
And in years past, you didn't have sufficient knowledge
Hmm.
into what all was happening really. How much fuel was I burning here? How much time was here? Those kinds of things that are there. And so I think there's a distrust of allocation of cost,
Mm.
which makes sense. There's kind of a lack of understanding of it doesn't have to be just a simple allocation. It can be really based on we know the fuel burn to get there. We know what they did before, what they did after, all the things that are there. And so we could have a full kind of a continuous timeline of what costs were really incurred. And then you drop shipments on top of them, right? It's really what's the cost
Mm.
of doing everything else, and then you happen to get paid for this piece, and this piece. And so having full visibility into the entirety of what your cost basis is a little bit different. And a lot of the legacy applications just don't have the capacity to understand, across a full time continuum, what are my real costs across that, not just on the portions of the calendar where I'm laden, right?
It's so interesting. I would have assumed that sort of the cost of doing business, and I'm just gonna in my head, it's like the foundation of the business. I really like how you said, the cost of doing business and then the shipment is just on top. Like that's just you know, it's just what you're doing, but there's
Yeah,
so much more built in
sure.
to the business. And I would have assumed with, I mean, QuickBooks and, standard accounting packages the way it is today, that business owners, carrier owners would already have that kind of built in. Is it just a function of too much tech or like too many pieces of I think about like the cash flow cycle and the paying for fuel cycle and the EDI connections? Like, is it just too many pieces of technology? Or is it really another opportunity for business owners to think differently about the business, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, I think it's probably a bit of both.
Okay.
The first is, there's a lot of nuance to saying, "Hey, I can get all this information from 15 different sources." And the first problem, I'm not sure it's too much tech, is that legacy applications don't have the ability to ingest all those data sources, right? Whereas Magnus is designed to ingest every every data source from any area, right? And then you overlay that into that kind of time continuum of what were the assets doing. So I think yes, there are a lot of sources of truth, but there's not a single one that's kind of ingesting all of it and saying I'm the owner of all this, and I'm mushing it all together into a way that then I can surface the total truth, right?
Is
So
that because legacy systems were just really meant for point to point shipment management, not holistic business applications?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if you think about, again, this kind of goes back to a shipment P&L, right? That's kind of how they were geared.
Yeah.
Like I took a transportation order that goes from A to B, and I've got $3.45 a mile, right? It wasn't really designed, when you think about taking that order, you don't go, okay, well, let me add a cost of what it takes to get my truck
Driver
trailer
there. Yeah.
there. Let's add the cost
Yeah.
of what are they going to do afterwards, right? Because those are the unknowns. So a lot of the legacy applications were just kind of built that way. Not wrong or right. It's just the capacity of the systems. Whereas we kind of look at it as a full-time continuum. And certainly technology's changed to do that. So all these things become additive to the full equation, and most of the legacy applications just weren't built based on that ideology of you need the whole truth across the entirety of the time, right? And it's there's no real solid start and end, unlike any given transportation order has a solid pickup and a solid delivery, but that's not when your costs start and end either. It's well before that and well after that. So I think there's a previous idea, and it becomes pervasive kind of in thought, that's your highlight information. And that's not really your highlight information. That just happens to be one component. Sure, it's the revenue source, so it's critical, but your costs are not solely constrained within that time window.
It's so interesting. You call Magnus a TMS, right? A transportation management system.
Mhm.
But it is a lot more than that.
For sure.
Like, sure, yes, the function of the business that you serve is transportation, right?
Mhm,
They are
mhm,
moving
mhm,
things.
mhm.
But at the end of the day, it's a business, almost an ERP, but I don't even know that I would use the
Yeah,
word ERP. Like
yeah,
it's new. I think it's so exciting. We're taping this in 2026.
yeah,
New opportunities for terms and words. I mean, being a marketer, I'm excited
yeah,
about
yeah,
this, but
yeah,
just the idea that this is so much more than just the transportation management,
yeah,
right? That it's beyond that. It's business application.
yep,
It's the whole total cost to serve.
yep,
And if you're only focused on just the shipment, you are going to miss
yeah.
a whole bunch of opportunities.
Yeah, one of the things that I always tell people is Magnus's full business life cycle.
Mm,
And the thing about this business, the life cycle is not just the shipments.
mm,
It's driver onboarding, it's driver home time, it's truck maintenance, it's trailer maintenance, it's all the things that are supporting. And for us, our big difference is whatever areas of knowledge that exist out there or whatever is happening, not just relative to shipment, we should be able to kind of replicate the entirety of what's happening in the world in its entirety relative how that impacts your business, not just on the shipment basis. So for us, we really do when we say, hey, it's the full business life cycle. It's not the full transportation order life cycle. It's the full business life cycle because you pay for the full business.
Will you tell me a little bit more about what that means to you? I like this. You just mentioned, hey, I'm going to take the macroeconomic changes that are kind of happening, right? And you and I have both been in transportation a long time. Weather, right?
Yeah.
Market dynamics,
Yeah.
tariffs, weird things coming out of Washington, fuel
Sure.
prices, right? Our customers are so impacted by market dynamics. Give me a little bit more about that. Is it a scenario planning?
Yeah, I think the first thing is there's a ton of information to ingest.
Mm,
There's you add that to how do I synthesize that,
mhm.
and then how do I make decisions at the time I need to make decisions with a subset of that information that's already cold and presented in a way that this is the most impactful thing. There's 150 things you may need to know. Here's the three things when you're making the decision you really need to know at the time you're making the decision. So that's kind of the key for us is, and I think for business owners, participants in their business, there are a ton of things, right? The human mind just can't ingest all those things and turn them into useful. In any given scenario, if I said, hey, you have 4 hours to research all the history, all the future, da 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 da, da, yeah, they might be able to do it. But to do that in a replicatable way that ensures max profitability or minimum cost to serve is really hard to do. And so for us, I think we just have to think about how do we make sure people understand that the vast amount of information certainly is overwhelming. We've been building this technology for 20 plus years, and that's been a major tenet for us is to make sure that we know there's a ton of information sources and how do we fully ingest those. We don't even know how we use it today, right? Or tomorrow or yesterday, but it's part of the story. And at some point, it's part of the decisioning process. And so for us, we kind of take some of that effort and mystery out of what's important, what's not. And this kind of goes back into a little bit of AI and LLM things. There are patterns that exist. We don't know them always,
Hmm.
right? This is knowledge that has to be acquired. And you have somebody who's been in the industry for 30 years, they're going to have a lot more knowledge than somebody who's been there for a year. The difference is when we have all that information digitized and in a single space, search space for the data, now we can start to really reduce the ramp time of what's really interesting and what are the critical components of that huge kind of data set of this is the whole world, right? And how can I really do all the research and knowledge as a human? You just can't. So that's where we come in and we just say, we're already ingesting all this stuff. We're not always right. It's not the idea. The idea is always just a little bit better.
And when you're using the data the way that you've set it up inside of Magnus and you're collecting all this data and it allows you does it allow you, I should say, does it allow your customers to get ahead of the problem solving that you know is going to come? So I'm thinking about natural stuff in the supply chain world like weather, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So you know disasters are coming. Does Magnus allow you to kind of like plan a little better? And is that, I mean, the topic of this particular conversation is margin. So can you then do a better job forecasting margin compression, things that are going to impact the business in different ways? Like, you talk about total business,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So forecasting is an interesting one. Forecast by nature is just kind of a guess, right?
Amen.
And the problem with that is you have to go back and look at, well, why was I guessing this, and what's my empirical evidence to do that? The biggest challenge that we see in that is people don't have a complete picture over here of what really happened. So the forecast kind of gets degraded. For us, kind of two perspectives. One is, can I fully regurgitate the whole world as it existed so that I can actually learn from everything that was happening, not just on a look back, but in a point in time, because the world changes every couple seconds. So when I made this decision, what was the shape of the world? What was the
Mm,
information I had? All the way out to now into forecasting or prognostic indications of, am I going to have freight out of here? Is this weather event really significant? Is this traffic significant? One of the easy ones that I tell people is, citrus. Pretty short window,
yeah.
right? Stuff coming out of Florida is more significant, not a lot of stuff going in there, right? So those are interesting components that if you don't contemplate those things, you're kind of impairing your ability to have any sort of accuracy with your forecasting. But if you don't know about those things, or you don't have them modeled in your full data
Mm.
set, it's kind of impossible to build a forecasting model. So for us, the real key is, how do we make sure the world's right? How are we surfacing the right things? Forecasts are just, that's just kind of a byproduct.
But I want to ask you a little different question because just a few minutes ago, you said we can start to see
Hmm.
trends, right? And no human has the capability to ingest all of the information and see trends, even if you've been in the space for 30
Hmm.
years.
Hmm.
Something is going to trip you up.
Hmm.
So the difference between a forecast and a trend is pretty clear. But given that you have so much data,
Hmm.
are you finding that giving your customers or your customers having access to the trends makes their forecasts maybe a little bit more reliable?
Yeah. I think
Okay.
I think that's the case. I think it makes it, initially one of the interesting things that we found is it makes it a little bit more complex
Why?
because it's based on a much richer data set.
Not
And
just my 30 years of
right,
experience.
they go, hey, this is
Ah.
this is what's happening, and this is what, I mean. One of the targets that we hear often is, my revenue per mile is $3.45, and I go, well, not really. It's not. It's $2.87. They go, no, 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 no. This is what we do. Look at all these orders. Here's how we bid them. Blah blah blah. And I go, but again, same issue. The truck didn't start there or finish there. You had all other things that were happening. Your best opportunity is whatever you quoted. Your actual is based on real things that happened, before and after that shipment. So I think, yes, you get highly, or a significant improvement in accuracy, but you also get some different answers than what you're used to because you are making a forecast based on incomplete pictures. So it's kind of two. One, you get better forecast. It's different than what you're used to, though.
Mm.
So that's a challenge for folks to understand. Hey, we're not just looking at the same thing and saying that's our benchmark. It's, let's look at this holistically and let that inform the forecast versus my 30 years of, this is our target, this is our goal. We come in, we give you the actual picture, and you go, okay, let's not assume the actual picture is wrong. Let's just understand what led to that. The actual picture is really right, but it deviates from your reality of how you thought the world existed before. So I think both of those things come into play of being open to a difference, and also the accuracy of the forecast is much different than what you were capable of in legacy systems or otherwise.
So, a little bit of a different question for you. The team now has access to all this data. They have access to forecasts. They may be closer to reality, they may not. But the decisions are still made at the desk level, right? The margin decisions are still made usually not by someone in the C-suite, who are the folks that you're talking to about, worldviews, et cetera, right? These are I've been there. I know
Yeah,
Sally,
yeah.
right? Like Sally is making the
Yep.
decision on exactly what's happening.
Yep.
And so at the dispatch level, at the human operator level, tell me a little bit about how Magnus impacts their ability to impact margin.
Yeah. So the first is yes, they're still making a lot of
Okay.
decisions. The big differentiator is what decisions are they making?
Mm,
Are they making every decision, or are they making the decisions that their decision actually has impact, right? And for positive. One of the challenges that we see is they are making a lot of decisions, but probably the easiest way to illustrate is somebody would go, "Well, I click here, and I click there," right? And I go, "Okay, why?" Well,
mhm.
that's what I do, and suddenly that's what they think is creating value, and you go, "Not really." 90% of the time, I can prove empirically that yes, you click here, you click here, you click there, and you don't do anything different. 10% of the time, you click here, you find an exception, you do something. I can model the 90% and you'll never click here, never click here, never click there, right? You'll just answer these differently. Rinse and repeat across all these different people that are involved in that. I think them understanding that each of their assumed efforts shouldn't be just assumed.
Mm.
It should be a consideration of why do I do this? Right. And one of the easiest ones that we run into is proof of delivery. You have these proof of delivery documents that come in. So many of our customers will go, well, our accounting department goes and views the proof of delivery manually. And I'm like, okay, what if you never viewed one of them? Would 90% of them pass whatever test you think are doing? So why do you want to look at all of them and incur that cost? Well, it's because it's important, right? Yeah. Maybe, maybe not, right? And that's the big distinction. Being willing to say maybe, maybe not. And I think that goes back to who are the people that are in these spots? Can they trust that the system is surfacing things correctly? And are they willing to change some of their paradigms based on the fact that the Magnus platform has a different suite of solutions that's geared towards optimizing where their time is spent. No different than where the trucks and drivers are spent, right? They want to be spending time making money, not spending money. Same thing in the office, right? And so our kind of contention is you have to be willing to make that little bit of a leap to go, yeah, maybe the way I've done it doesn't intrinsically create value. So maybe there's an opportunity for the system to inject things more smartly into their decisioning and what decisions they really make to create value. I think that's a challenge is they don't always know which decisions create value. Sometimes it's the idea of I made 100 decisions, so that must have created value. Maybe not. Maybe 90 of them didn't really matter.
Do you f- do you find that when teams have access to more data, right, or better data, that even the frontline teams make better decisions? Or does it take some pretty significant like retraining on, hey, your decisions can create value?
Yeah.
Is there a gap there?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, data tells a story
Hmm.
always. And you can almost always have data tell whatever story you want. So
Oh,
sometimes
that's so interesting.
yeah, well, this is why spreadsheets, right?
Yeah,
Because
spreadsheets,
spreadsheets tell whatever story I
whatever
want,
story
and I
I
have
want to
no
tell you.
obligation
Yeah.
to have a normalized data set. So I think more data doesn't necessarily do anything by
Okay.
itself.
Okay.
It's how am I standardizing that data so that I can't necessarily manipulate it to tell what story I want?
Okay.
It tells the story.
Mm.
Not that the story is always correct, but it's consistently achieved in the same manner. And if we have a problem, let's change the whole underlying consideration, not go pull this data set out to have it craft a totally different narrative.
Mm.
So I think just the idea of more data is not in any way valuable. It's how are we making sure that that data is used consistently to answer questions in the same manner so that when I'm saying, here's why we did this, that, or the other, it's supported empirically, not because I did another spreadsheet that took advantage of this additional data set that told a story I wanted to tell. So I think just voluminous data, not valuable by itself. It has to be, and this is where we get into it, has to be built into the entire story and overlaid correctly. And so that's kind of how we look at it is whatever data we can get, that's what we want to do. Our job is to synthesize that data into the total picture of what's the whole story, not just, hey, let's just get more data, kick out more reports where people are answering questions, again, that don't really have value
Mm.
just because there's data there.
So let me ask the question a different way. As you're migrating new Magnus customers off of legacy TMSs, this is my assumption. My assumption is new customer comes in, most of them are not doing this job on spreadsheets. They have some sort of like TMS system. If they're still doing spreadsheets, awesome, well done.
Well,
That's amazing, right? They have some sort of system,
yeah,
right? Back to the connection between the Magnus tool and the margin that the frontline human is making decisions on. Is it a dramatic difference? Like, are they able to make better decisions? I know that maybe the volume of data is not the reason why, but if you set it up correctly, which it sounds like you are,
yeah,
then your frontline humans, let me pull this all together, you can
yep,
tell me if I'm right,
yep,
should be managing exceptions only
yep,
and have access to what they need to have access to within the framework of what the leadership team has decided is the appropriate amount of data to make the right decision to protect the margin and the relationship with their customer.
yep.
So is it a dramatic change going from sort of legacy TMS or God forbid spreadsheets to a Magnus um to a Magnus environment where you have the opportunity to create value? I would imagine that like your frontline people sometimes you mentioned earlier like my activity equals value.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
once
yeah.
they have the opportunity to actually contribute value, is it a dramatic shift? I'm kind of asking you two questions. Like,
Yeah.
one, is it a shift in the tech that does it? And then two, have you witnessed like I don't know, I wanna use the word grow up, but it's probably not the right
Yeah, yeah,
word. The evolution of the individuals at the team who
yeah,
then feel more empowered to deliver
yeah,
better results for customers.
yeah. So probably the easiest. We were doing an implementation a while back, and so we're going through, what's their business process,
Yeah.
right? What's happening in the world? How do we snap that to a business process, and then how do we make sure Magnus is doing this? And so we go through the things, and we're contemplating what this lady did every day. We're basically saying, well, all of these things are automated, and at some point, a couple days into it, she just looks up and she goes, "I don't have anything to do anymore." And I was like, well, in your previous context, that's true, right? But the funny thing is, she was a very talented person, and there's a difference in confidence and somebody going, I don't need to do all this junk I was doing before.
Yeah.
And now I can actually do things that do create value. And so I'd say there's a huge kind of consideration. There's a little bit of sticker shock sometimes where we go, well, all this stuff's automated, right? And you don't really need to do these extra actions you were doing. So focus over here. Invariably, there's opportunity for improvement all over, right? So I think it's kind of the consideration of I don't need to do this. I can trust that Magnus is doing this underneath the scenes automatically. I'm actually going to do some of the things that I've dreamt about fixing before, because I can spend time on those, because now 95% of my effort is fully automated. I don't need to have these repetitive clicks or whatever the case is. And I've got a kind of system that self heals most of the time. When it can't, that's where I can jump
Mm.
in and really provide a great remedial process. And so I think that's the typical evolution that we see, is that people will recognize that the world's changing, and that's a hump you have to get over, right? Their job may be changing. It just means they're actually going to have significantly more impact
Mm.
than they were before. So that's probably the biggest difference that we see, where people are like, oh, I don't really need to do these things. I can actually spend time doing things that I know empirically create value, but I didn't have the time to do before.
Well, and from a leadership perspective, what a I want to use the word treat. Like what a treat, what a
Yeah,
gift to be able to say to someone, I'm imagining someone who's been on the team for 15 years and she's been a really good member of the team and she knows where the bodies are
for
buried and
sure.
she's talented and
Yep.
she, has been with you through thick and thin and you want to continue to use this person and
Yeah,
find something
yeah.
for her to do, et cetera. And she's really good at solving these
Yep.
problems.
Yep.
I would imagine that that's good for all parties involved.
For sure. Well, and I think there's, the challenge with knowing where the bodies are buried
Mm.
is a heavy weight, right? And at some point, somebody's going to figure it out, right? So the challenge is you can't ever do anything to fix it, because you're
Right.
so inundated and just to keeping the stuff going,
Yeah.
that I think that becomes, not just for the leadership team, but for the contributor. They can be like, wow, I can actually improve some of the things that continue to stack up the bodies,
Mm-hmm.
or that I've had to do to keep those covered up, right, from servicing. So I think there is, on both sides, from the contributor and from the management team, the acknowledgement of, we can actually have a healthy impact, not on the status quo, but on the improvement and continuous improvement of the business. And I think that's where people get a lot of satisfaction, is in improving things. Yeah.
Mm.
And most of the people that we run into, kind of like the lady I was talking about, she didn't really care. It wasn't a negative statement. She wasn't having anything to do. It was just kind of an aha moment. And then it quickly shifted to, great, now I can actually do things that create an impact or improve the business, not just maintain the business.
It's funny. At my business, I have just a list in my phone of all the things I know that
For
need to
sure.
get fixed,
For
right?
sure.
Like every
Yep.
entrepreneur,
Yep.
you do too, of
Yep.
all the things you know you need
Yep.
to
Phone,
fix.
computer, notes,
Yeah,
anywhere else.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like every
1,000
yeah,
places. Yep.
post-it notes, right?
Yep. Yep.
I would imagine that aha moment at the next, leadership meeting where you're going through the rocks or whatever, your
The graveyard.
the graveyard of things that never really get fixed, and you start to have the leadership team say, hey, our investment in this tool, we did it right. We now have what we need. And we're starting to tick off the things that we couldn't ever get to before.
Yep.
Must be just an awesome experience for your customers who are like, yes, the tech works, right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
the tech is great.
Yep.
It's working, it's doing what it's supposed
Yep.
to. But the larger impact is actually what the team can do now that they have time freed up
For sure.
to do the things they just couldn't get to.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's, it kind of goes back to, the whole idea should be continuous improvement,
Yeah.
right? Margins going to erode if you don't improve.
Okay.
That's just it, right? So what are you doing every day to improve the business? You can't just say, I'm going to abandon what I have to do and just focus on improvement things, unless you have something else that's doing all the requisite components. And that's where Magnus, really steps in and shines. It's going to take all those things that, the variability or the effort to maintain those things was high before. And it just takes all that assimilation, automation out of the mix, so that you can focus on a continuous improvement. And then I can say, I'm not working to maintain margin. I'm working to improve margin, and everything out in the world is working to erode margin.
Mm.
And I can actually now counteract that effectively versus just trying to maintain the status quo.
I really appreciate that because there are a lot of tech providers and vendors who would say it is my technology will improve your margin. But that's not really what you're saying.
Hmm.
You're not saying that Magnus alone will improve margin. Like, you might be saying that
Sure.
to some extent, but what you're really saying is, let me take all of the margin reducing activities off your plate,
Yeah.
and let me give you the opportunity to do the things in your business that will improve margin.
Sure.
And I love the comment you just said on, if you are not improving margin, you are going to lose
For sure.
because the entire world is against you.
Yep.
Which, as a business owner, feels very, very true. And
Yep.
I don't own any assets, but I would imagine
It's even harder.
like the insurance costs and just the cost of cash, like everything is going up.
Yep.
And so knowing that you are freeing up your team, even on the front line,
Yep.
to improve margin because they're taking tasks off their plate that actually don't improve margin,
Yep.
must be such a relief.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, it's huge. And this is, kind of going back to the mindset. There are people who don't have the time to consider the value of what they're doing. It's just kind of everything's high intensity. Everybody works 150 hours a
Yeah.
week, right? So how do I have the time to do anything better or new? I barely have the time to do it right or even sometimes do it wrong.
Right.
Right.
Mostly I'm burying bodies.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think, us taking all those things that are kind of time sucks and cost considerations out is a huge piece, right? Even before we say, hey, you can actually use this tool to improve your yield by making better decisions. You can use the tool to suck cost out of your existing cost structure without a ton of effort, right? You just have to be willing to go, okay, yeah, I will let it do this for me in an automated fashion. So yeah, I think that's a big thing. I think that's one of the things that we see with technology people is they want to have this big whiz bang thing about what it's going to do. Like I've seen like optimization people say, well, I'm going to improve your revenue per mile by 43%. And I'm thinking there's not many trucking companies out there that have 43% of opportunity for improvement, right? It just tells me you don't really know what you're talking about, right? We in the business can make 10, 15, maybe 20% dumb decisions, but we're not making 43% dumb decisions. So for us, it's
I love how you turn that around, by the way.
Yeah. What's that?
Sorry, I just interrupted you, but you turned it around from we helped you improve 43% to you're making 43% bad decisions today.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to tell you that you're making them. Sorry,
Yeah.
I love that you turned it around. Your math brain does that.
Right. And this is where I look at some of these technology companies that really don't understand.
Yeah.
And they think that I hate to say it, but they think that you're that dumb. You're like, we're not that dumb. And it just proves to me that maybe you are. And so for
Sorry,
us,
I interrupted you.
No.
So you can find somewhere between 10 and 20-ish% improvement just by implementing the software.
Sure. And this is the thing I think people don't really appreciate. Everyone wants to have these headline numbers of, hey, we'll get 15% here and 20% here, and that gets you your 43% number. Not to say that's not achievable, but there's no one swath that says I'm going to go do this in one way. It's the additive benefit of I can take 1% here, 2% here, 3% here, those kinds of things that our perspective is you have to work within the reality of the industry. And our people are not stepping over dollar bills to pick up $10 bills.
Okay.
They're just not, right? They will pick up every dollar bill on the way. And our philosophy is we should have that same idea. We're not waiting on the $10 bill to show up. We're implementing solutions that grab the dollar bills along the way. There are some $10 bills out there sometimes, right? And some of our AI solutions and other things are unlocking those. but all along the way, there's still dollar bills to pick up, and everyone matters.
I had a conversation with the CEO of a very big brokerage a long time ago, and he told me, if you can find me 2%,
Sure.
if you can find me 2%,
Yeah.
I will pay you any dollars you want, right? He was like, I need a 2% edge.
Yeah.
And so I can connect that deeply, because if it's 1% here and 2% there and
Yeah.
3% here overall, right? Using the tool. And
Yeah.
then I really am connecting deeply with, it's not just the tool, it's the freedom that you're giving your super talented folks who are working 80, 90 hours a week, just clicking buttons to make it happen,
Yeah.
giving them the opportunity to really solve problems and add value,
Yeah.
which is a language that you've used a lot that I really
Yeah.
appreciate.
Yeah. Well, final thought, the law of large numbers works, especially in trucking, right? If you have a fleet that runs 100 million miles and you go, hey, I average 2.51 revenue per mile across 100 million miles. If I can improve that by 1 or 2% times 100 million miles, which is what these folks are doing, it's a huge contribution to profit, right?
Yeah.
And so we always kind of look at those things. There's no, you know, wild, crazy aha moment that says, wow, we were making 43% dumb decisions and golly, we just totally missed this idea. It's really those 1, 2, 3, 4% improvements that are additive across the entire business life cycle, which again, why Magnus is the whole package, right? Because
Mm.
there's no one little spot that's hugely beneficial by itself. It's really that whole business life cycle that has to be considered and contemplated when you're thinking about where do I get my 1, 2, 3% from.
I really appreciate this, Matt. I would like to think that I know a lot about what's going on, but every time I talk to you, I learn something new. So I'm super grateful. Tell our listeners and watchers how they can find you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the easiest is go to magnustech.com. There's web forms on there, phone numbers on there. There's a simple ROI calculator on there just to kind of give you an idea of how we think about things that are out there. We're certainly at a lot of the industry conferences, so come up and say hi. We love this industry, everything about it. So anytime we're happy to chat about what the nuances any of our customers or potential customers see, but any one of those ways are great ways to get to us.
Well done. Thanks again,
Thanks.
Matt.
You bet. Thanks.